Some of the ways that we understand American gay history is through the Stonewall uprising as a before and after, right? But I think before Stonewall, there was this incredible moment of gay liberation, queer liberation, Black liberation in the 20s in Harlem.
Most people remember learning about the Harlem Renaissance in school. Langston Hughes, blues, jazz, an explosion of artistic talent. But what we don't learn about is that Harlem was also a thriving gay community.
So the way that Harlem became a haven for LGBT life is the way that it became a haven for Black people from all over the world, really. It became this crossroads, right? And the big part of this is the Great Migration, which obviously meant that a lot of Black people came north, especially to cities that are now considered Black cities like Chicago and Harlem in New York City. It was known at the time as the Black Mecca, right? And so it was in some ways the largest Black city in the world. And it did, of course, include a lot of energy and excitement, cabaret, blues, jazz. So it really was in some ways a crossroads of all of these different artistic and musical and cultural energies. A lot of white patrons would go to Harlem, to quote unquote slum, because the mores were much more relaxed. And especially during the Prohibition era, a lot of these were in some ways, speakeasies.
Vices flourished in Harlem because African Americans did not have the political power to be able to demand that government keep these things out of their neighborhood. And the corruption of the police and of judges, all of that enabled gay activity as well as all kinds of other activity to thrive in Harlem.
A lot of the reasons that a lot of Black folks came to Harlem was because they weren't allowed to be in other parts of the city, right? And so again, it's a paradoxical form of freedom that's based out of legal, economic, and political disenfranchisement.
To this day, when people study the Harlem Renaissance, they often don't consider the LGBTQ aspects of it. And part of that is because many of the gay writers did not actually identify as gay.
And Langston Hughes is a wonderful figure in this era because he's considered somewhat queer, but he was never fully out politically, whereas Richard Bruce Nugent is the poster boy for someone who was unashamedly out.
And there certainly are many jazz figures who were gay.
Gladys Bentley was notorious for wearing men's clothing in public. I think she would be what we would call a butch lesbian. And she wore a white tuxedo, and she played with gender.
There was also, of course, the drag ball scene in Harlem, which not everyone talks about. That goes all the way back to the 20s in Harlem. And so it was quite a free time. And ironically, that freedom of sexual expression as well as gender fluidity really petered out. The Great Depression is said to have caused the downfall of the Harlem Renaissance, as well as the increasing conservatism in American culture to the Second World War.
That conservatism is one of the reasons the Harlem Renaissance isn't remembered as a time of gay liberation.
So there was a retrospective closeting, so to speak, of these figures. The consequences of not teaching the period of the Harlem Renaissance as being inherently queer is that queerness remains white in the cultural imaginary because we don't have this story of Black queerness. I think a lot of people talk about the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969, and a lot of us are trying to re-understand it as being centered on trans women and trans women of color. And in a sense, it's a similar story where a lot of the Black and brown queer people were the ones who were at the forefront of this movement. And so it's important to uncover this history to, again, recover these ancestors who really led the charge and try to unforget all the liberation that they created.
You might think that gay icons are a relatively new phenomenon in the United States, but go back to the roaring 1920s, and you'll discover the story of one of the LGBTQ+ community's greatest pioneers, blues performer Gladys Bentley. In 1910, millions of African Americans began moving from the rural South to the urban North as a part of the largest movement of people in U.S. history. Many settled in Harlem, where in 1918 a social, political, and artistic expression of Black culture known as the Harlem Renaissance began. And in 1925, Bentley made her own move from Philadelphia to New York, seeking a better life. From an early age, Bentley felt most comfortable wearing her brother's clothes and was attracted to both genders. But her parents did not accept her identity, and after several failed attempts to cure her, Gladys Bentley ran away and took the stage name Bobby Minton. Amid Harlem speakeasies, where people often gathered secretly to drink alcohol during Prohibition, famous singers like Bessie Smith were known for elaborate headdresses and beautiful gowns. But Gladys was different and broke the rules as a cross-dressing queer performer. She donned a tuxedo and belted out the blues while playing hip boogie-woogie piano. At a time when homosexuality was still illegal in the United States, her edgy act, centered around replacing the lyrics to popular songs with something more outrageous, quickly gained her a large fan base. Soon she became one of the wealthiest Black women of her time. But Gladys's career was not immune to social pressures. When Prohibition was finally repealed, the government monitored the entertainment industry, including Gladys. In California, she wasn't supposed to perform in menswear, and when the U.S. government began to fire many of its gay employees during the infamous Lavender Scare, many people in the LGBTQ+ community felt pressured to hide their true identity. Gladys used hormone treatments, married a man, and posed in photos as a traditional homemaker. Historians debate whether her reinvention was authentic or an attempt to evolve her image, but Gladys's embrace of individuality remains an inspiration to many and reflects the complex issues surrounding gender identity. Why do you think performers make changes to their persona?